is it stable in its intended condition over time and over weather? So it doesn't mean it has to be smooth. We can have trails that we intend to be rough and rugged and challenging, as long as it's stable and it's staying there. And erosion, of course, is the biggest piece of that. But there's also braiding and shortcutting things, which really come to part of the social sustainability. Is it meeting users' needs? Do we have enough trail for the number of users that we have? Do we have enough trail for the outing length that people want? Is the challenge level that folks would like, are we meeting them there? Or are there only really hard trails and people need some easy trails? Or people want some challenge but we only have sidewalks, and we'll see social trails develop, and social trails be user-created trails, not necessarily designed, not necessarily for sustainability like physical, or even designed for, let's make sure we're not trampling rare plants, or going right into critical habitat right next to an osprey nest, something like that. So we want to manage use too, and to do that we need to meet users' needs, or they vote with their feet and go make their own. And then the last piece is managerial. Does our trail system fit within, I'm not going to say the constraints, I'll say within the resources that the land manager has to maintain the trail, to help manage users, to care for this facility. And that's not always a government agency. It can be a private group like Cowwood. It could be a private landowner like where I was swinging a tool today. Whistler Bike Park has a whole different concept of managerial sustainability than an underfunded, I won't use Boulder because they have tons of money in their department, but an underfunded municipality, or maybe the Forest Service. Constant budget cuts, right? So when we're planning a trail system, we have to kind of keep that in mind. What's the the social side, what people want, and then also weighing that against what are the ecological values and what else is the land managed for, but also can that land manager maintain that facility. So those are kind of the 4 pieces of sustainable. And you guys are going to hit this as a crew leader. You're going to tell a crew, hey, we're making a sustainable trail, and someone, and it'll probably be a mountain biker, grumble, sustainable means silly, stupid, sanitized, lame, not fun, dumbed down. You'll hear it. I'm hoping you guys will, at some point, and challenge each other on this when we go in the field, be able to articulate some of that. Even the physical piece. Hey, it doesn't mean it has to be smooth. It just means it has to be stable. Right? Not dumping sediment into a watershed. Not rutting out and people are going around it and creating 7 trails parallel. Okay. I like to think of basically 3 touchstones of trail design. If you understand these 3 key principles, you don't need me. You can invent anything else that I'll teach you tonight. You can invent anything that was in that Trail Solutions book, anything that's in the Forest Service specs, which they just came out with, and I have trouble reading them. They're pretty in-depth at times. So the first is erosion, understanding erosion. And there's more than one type of erosion. We're going to go into each of these. Someone said users take the path of least resistance. I go a step further and say they act by instinct. They do whatever is most attractive, which often is the path of least resistance, but it can vary user to user and even which direction. And here's the one that'll maybe get your scratching your heads a little bit. We've got all these tools to go build trails, but I would say trails themselves are actually a tool. They're one of the tools to help manage users, as opposed to just something that an agency has to go manage their trails. Trails are actually one of the ways to help guide and shape visitor behavior to possibly achieve some other non-trail goals, like conservation, as an example. Like what we're doing at Brainerd, yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about erosion a little bit. I mean, erosion's a good thing, right? It created most of our national parks, like all of our, crown jewel national parks, Yosemite, Grand Canyon, Bryce. I'm blanking, of course, on some of our national parks, but a lot of these are erosion. So we could go out, build some fall line trails, preferably in some uncohesive soils, and we're making the next national park, right? Awesome. Right? I think I see one starting out on the Marshall or Mesa Trail The old road? That looks like it's well on its way to Grand Canyon. So why would we care about erosion? I mean, it's a good thing, right? It's the Grand Canyon. Well, at that point, we are changing the landscape at a non-geologic pace. We are changing the watershed. We are sediment loading. We're doing all these different things. So erosion is one of the biggest things with trails. And the thing is that erosion can start to actually have some social sustainability issues too. And then these things get together and start to perpetuate the problem. This is a local shot. Anyone know where this is?
Anemone?
This is Anemone, yeah. Where's the trail?
I don't know, but I was up and over that hill.
Down in that
That looks really familiar
Is
from last year.
it this one? This one? This one? This one? This one? It's hard to see, but we're starting. By the way, Matt's not a small man. He's not huge, but he's about my height. That gives you a sense for how much soil is being lost. That's dump truckfuls, right?
Is some of that flood related?
No, this was in 2011. This photo was taken.
Okay.
Yeah. Interestingly, as a side note, there's a lot of flood damage to trails. There was very little damage to most of the trails that were built in the last 10 years that we had a lot of influence on. To the point where people are actually kind of now calling, like I never had a city soldier say, like, so, how can we make this look more like this other stuff you designed? And they're starting to do it because they're really cool to see. So let's talk about water a little bit. 2 volunteers. Guys, jump up.
Souls.
All right.
It's because
so
we match.
I'm not going to read off slides. You can see the different types of erosion and all that stuff. We have team, Team Patriot here. All right. So I want Dan to be. You're gonna be cheerleaders.
What?
You're gonna be cheerleaders.
Okay.
Give me a V for volume. Yeah.
Oh, this is fun. I just did this the other day.
And then now give me keep it up.
Oh.
And Jane, what's your V for?
Velocity.
Velocity.
Oh.
Right? So volume and velocity, which you put them together and you got a W, just like water.
Oh.
Right? Water has it increases its erosive potential with more volume and more velocity. Right? So what we want to do is we want to spread water out. We want to make sure it keeps low amounts of volume, low concentration. The water's moving slowly, not running fast. You guys can sit down. And so think like water, right? When we're out there on the trail, we're going to talk a little bit why we design trails the way we do, and water is a big piece of it. But when you're out there on the trail and you see that little blue flag and like, they want to drain, water will just go there. Think like water. Sometimes I'll even bring a little blue inflatable ball if I'm leading a crew, and we'll use that and roll it down the trail, and it acts kind of like water. Water generally goes downhill. Water generally follows the path of least resistance, right? So we want to think like water. We want to disperse water. We want to keep its volume, spread it out so we don't ever have a lot of volume in one place. And as it picks up volume and as it heads downhill, it gets more velocity, right? So think like water, spread it out, keep it slow. However, one thing also happens with water. Water's moving. There's quite a bit of it, and it's moving pretty quick. And you suddenly stop it or ask it to suddenly change direction, all that sediment it's carrying falls out and it drops. And you get these. So if you're walking along, you see a little rut. Look where the trail ahead of you below that becomes a little less steep, and see if you see a bunch of silt and sand. It's kind of a telltale. So you guys will see it on the trail. By the way, I'm going to ruin every hike for you. You're never going to be able to just go enjoy a trail again. You're going to be analyzing all the time. This photo is where is that? That is Westback. I tried to use local photos as much as I could tonight. There's a few from all over the country. This was the Aspen Alley Trail. It was used as a skid road during fuel thinning, and the contractors, the lumber company, they didn't really use it for lumber. The cutting contractor, in their contract said, you have to put back, return these to a trail's condition. So they had their trail, their road, they drug in a bunch of slash on the side to make it like 4 to 5 feet wide, called a trail. What happened with the water? It got trapped. It got trapped by the berms and the slash, and all concentrated. So we had a lot of volume, and then it ran downhill, and it got velocity. This was taken in March or April. No, it must have been April or May. Right after the cutting was done. This trail was in place less than 4 months before it became a foot deep rut.
Yeah, that's 6 to 8 inch. Ooh.
Right? Yes, at least foot wide, probably 8 to 10 inches deep in 4 months. So, water. We've harped on water. We'll get into that a little more in the field too. So let's talk about user forces. Right? This is a fun one. We're going to go on a slight tangent here. Users cause erosion. Okay? Period. No user doesn't cause any erosion. Users have forces on the trail. Some of those forces help us. They make the trail more stable to a certain extent. Some of those forces try to loosen the soil and cause erosion. Alright, I need 2 more volunteers. Wendy, hop up for me. And let's go with Danny. You're sitting right here. You're on the hot seat. Okay. Hop up, literally. Hop up on the table. Oh, right up here. Perfect. Nice. Alright, Vic, turn on the music. We'll get dancing up here. Okay. Now, we have a couple of users. Not drug addicts, trail users. Although I'm not judging. So, here's a question for you. We're walking along, and users are exerting force on the trail, right? They have weight. We all have mass. Regardless of how much we've been swinging a tool and are dehydrated, we still have some mass. Now, that downward force is compression. That's packing, right? Maybe? But if it was, let's say we had a piece of chalk and you're packing it, at some point you get too much force and the soil or the chalk or the substance comes apart. Now I'm curious here. If I put my hand down, would I let either of these ladies step on my hand? Why? Okay, why?
Crush, right, compression.
Actually, I would. However, I would let, and this has nothing to do with size. I actually like to do this with like a big old 300-pound dude in soft shoes, and then a small woman in firmer, knobby shoes. But I'm not going to let Wendy step on my hand because her sandals are pretty hard and pretty firm. Actually, you probably would step on my hand and be all right. Danny, would I let Danny?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it. Step on my fingers.
That's so soft.
No, I mean, like, actually do it. Yeah, like, see? It's really not a problem because the force is spread out. Even with these shoes, quite honestly. Yeah, step on my hand. Yeah. No, with your other foot up too. I mean, really, step on it. It's just not a big deal. Because that weight is being spread out over an area. But you guys can hop off. So, one of the things I like to do is, I like to think about users in terms of PSI, pounds per square inch, right? Force per area. I'm a physics nerd, I have a pocket protector. Maybe 2, and spare one in my truck in case one gets dirty. So, here's my tangent. What users cause the most erosion? Let's just go through, let's rank, try to do this in a somewhat random order. Hikers, we just did hikers. Let's do horses, let's do bikes, and let's do motorized. Which users have the most to least compressive force?
Like motorized bike.
Any idea? So most,
I think it
let's say
depends on
what are the top
seasons.
2 most compressive force? Who?
Horses.
I would say like going to taekwondo, like if you minimize the area that's in contact, you're going to do the most damage. So something with like 4 hooves or dogs, where all that force is concentrated in a small area.
Okay, it's the right thinking.
So,
It's the right thinking.
following that principle.
Okay, so horses, because they're 1,000 to 2,000 pounds depending on the breed, plus the rider and the gear they're bringing. and it's in a generally in an area smaller than this because it's only the outer portion, and it's a really hard substance if it's a shod horse, especially with a metal shoe, right? I mean, it's almost it's darn near like having a tool out there on the trail, right? How about let's do say hikers and mountain bikes. Who's got more compressive force?
I would say hikers. Rubber's kind of spread out more.
Bikes.
Who says hikers have more compressive force? Who says bikes have more compressive force? So, we can just do a quick little calculation. Say I'm 160 pounds. I've got a shoe. I've got two shoes actually.
Ooh,
Right?
nice job.
I know match. My wife is totally proud.
Wow. Match.
I know, right? I don't have to wear socks, fortunately, today, because those probably wouldn't match. So I've got two shoes, so I've got 160 pounds, and I've got area, right? Maybe a square foot-ish. But actually, as I walk, I'm really only on 1 foot at a time. So now I'm down to a foot by 3 inches, 4 inches, maybe a third of a square foot. So about 160 pounds on a third of a square foot. What's that PSI come out to in terms of inches? So inches would be 12.3, about 36 inches. So what's the quick math on that? 160 divided by, well actually it's less than that because when we walk we usually do this.
It's going to be like,
right?
It's going to be between 30 and 40.
So, we've got maybe 10 square inches. So that would be about 16 pounds per square foot in theory, right? Boots, maybe a little more. Heavier hiker, a little more. Towing off, definitely a lot more. How about bikes? How much compactive compressive force do bikes have?
They have
Mountain
that
bikes
little patch of
touching.
rubber.
Yeah,
touching,
that's
right?
actually touching. That's true.
You got two, well, depending on type of rider, right?
Yeah.
So you've got like 2 square
Yeah.
inches. You got a
There's
square inch on
constant
each
motion
tire.
It's a fat
versus
bike.
not a gap in between.
They're
That
always
is
touching.
true. Actually, that is a pretty big factor, particularly in shear. Here, bikes is the easy one. You actually don't have to do any math. One of Newton's laws to do with the apple was that every force has an equal and opposite reactive force, right? So if they're running with, and a mountain bike these days runs 20 to 25 psi in its tires. Newton's law says that force on the ground is also 20 to 25 psi. So actually, that's the easy one. So actually, pretty darn similar. And interestingly, there have been a couple studies. The most notable was commissioned by National Park Service that studied erosion from different types of users, and they found that in most situations, it was almost identical between hikers and mountain bikes. There was not a discernible difference. They couldn't look at the sample and decide and tell you who it was. There just wasn't. Statistically, there wasn't. There are some situations where you're going to user force where each group can have more or less. So let's talk about the other user force. So compression is you're standing here, right? It's packing soil, making it tighter. Eventually, too much pressure and that soil fails. The other one would be if we, and we won't do this on the table. Let's say we smeared butter down where the chips are, and we asked you to start here, run, and stop.
Not a good idea.
Right? Dan would probably be willing to try this. What would happen?
Give me some beer.
You try to stop and you'd slide, right? That same law. You need that reactive force. So whether you're trying to stop, if you're walking down a hill, you got a pack on maybe, backpacking, and you're coming down a hill and it's a little loose, it's sketchy, right? You feel like you're going to slide out. Because that's the shear force is what we call that. Shear. Compression and shear. Same thing if you're trying to hike up a hill. You have to push back and down to propel yourself up and forward. Right?
Yep.
So that force that's not going into the soil, but is going at an angle to the soil, that we'll call that shear. And that is really the force that generally would loosen soil particles. So, again, same kind of physics applies. You know, we can look at the different trail users, horses, we can look at motorized, we can look at bikes, we can look at hikers. And, you know, again, they've done their studies, you know, in a sample plot. Basically, hikers and bikes are identical in erosion. Motorized is a bit more, horses are quite a bit more. The big thing with motorized versus mountain bike is they have a throttle so they can get more of that shear force going, right? Now, going up a hill, generally speaking, hikers are exerting more shear force on the soil than bikes. Where bikes create more shear force is if they're usually slowing down abruptly. Going up a hill, the rider doesn't have that much power. Yeah, they get a little extra torque, mechanical advantage to the chain, but they just really don't have enough power to break that loose. However, if you have somebody going fast and you ask them to all of a sudden stop and slow down very quickly, that's where mountain bikes will have more shear force than a hiker or a runner typically. Why do I say this? It's not about which users should be on a trail or not on a trail or who's better than another. It's we want to be designers out there, right? Even when we're working on the trail, we're still designing. We're understanding the physics that's happening. Let's look at how these forces act on a trail a little bit. So the compression, I mean shear, we get it. It loosens soil and makes it available for transport by other means. As we're hiking along, we're pushing down that soil, a couple things can happen. We're compressing the soil, and our tread that was, let's say, flat, the center of it gets compressed, right? Now, that can trap water, and water can run down the trail. The other thing that happens is we've got our trail, maybe it's already looked up, maybe it's not, and there's some loose particles. We're hiking up, you know, or we're going to hit backpack, we're trying to slow down going downhill, we're running and slowing down going downhill, and we loosen a little of that soil. As that soil is loose and it gets picked up and kicked around, some of those particles fall right back on the trail. But others, you know, might hit the side of your shoe, your calf, your whatever, and they'll get displaced off the trail. Sometimes they get caught up in the grasses, and they settle on the edge, and so this little berm can build up. So we'll get some compression, and then we'll get some of the soil that was loose here displaced and creates a berm. And we end up with a situation that traps water. Water coming down the hillside, gets on the trail, now it doesn't want to flow across because it wants to flow along the trail, path of least resistance. Right? I'm running through this a little fast because this part's better to hear it once or twice tonight, and then we'll see it in the field. Here's a good example. This is Bryce, by the way. Water got trapped, ran down, more volume, more velocity, and eventually it blew up. At a turn, right? They wanted to kind of keep going straight.
That's how we stay in business, right?
So we've got water. We've got users. What's another erosive force? Yeah. So wind tends to move soil more than loosen soil. We see this a lot locally. We see this on High Plains Trailway south of town. Not very steep. There's a trail. It's on the fall line, but it's only 2 or 3%. I see some water running down it, but really it's a non-cohesive soil. Users are walking on it. It loosens some soil. That trail happens to be primarily parallel to the main wind pattern. So it very easily picks up those fines, blows them, hits the grass, hits little eddies, those fines drop out. Next time you're out there, you'll see a series, well, the trail started out like this, actually 48 inches. Now it's like 12 feet wide with lots of little spurs, and if you look at the edges, there's these little humps. Probably need to meander that trail a little more so that we don't get the wind tunnel effect. You may have to surface it and bring in a little material. So why does this, why does this all happen? And how does it matter for a user? It comes back to that other piece, our second touchstone. This is where they interface. Users, I say, act by instinct. They do the most attractive. They go to the most attractive place. They do the most attractive thing. Doesn't always mean the easiest or the path of least resistance, although that's often the case. I'm going to say it's the most fun. and also the most in line with what they want their experience to be or their outing to be that day. How many trails do we see here?
I see at least 3, maybe 4.
5.
Oh yeah.
I see 6. So what happens? Primary trail, our original trail is probably here, right? It's on the fall line. It's not very steep. It's on the fall line. We get some compaction, some water running down it. Becomes a little muddy. Becomes a rut. Users say, walking in the rut doesn't sound very fun. It's really easy to stand right over here and move over a foot, right, and walk in the grass. We see this a lot in wilderness. Ton in wilderness. Right? Part of that is we have some destination motivated users. They want challenge. They want to get to the pass. They don't want to switch back, so shortcut them. And a lot of these trails are just user creative. Boom, straight up the valley. Path of least resistance to get there. Yep. Trail becomes a bit of a rut. It has obstacles. It's not fun. Can move over. Create a new one. We see that a ton. Pretty gentle. Grass, right? Gentle swell. Pretty easy. Well, wait a minute. And they're avoiding this little rut. We can look at another trail. This is Fruta, Colorado. Now wait a minute. This looks a hell of a lot gnarlier and more challenging than this. Why are people going around that little rut, yet they're staying on the trail there?
There's no other option.
Because we're crazy.
We don't want to get our feet muddy now, do we?
A lot of it's the path of least resistance. If we're out there on the trail and we see that people are going around an obstacle, we can take the obstacle out. Maybe it's a water bar. We're walking around the water bar that's failed, right? Or we can make the not trail harder, less inviting. So we actually have some options when we're out there. So again, think like the user. What's that person? What's that cyclist? What's the hiker? What's the horse? What's the dog? What are they going to do? How are they going to interact? That's true on a tread-by-tread basis. I won't go into too much, but on a system-wide and trail planning basis, there's a fair amount of that too. Meaning that people like loops. People like destinations of some sort of I'm here, I'm there. Well, I've reached the spot. But even if it's just like the little view of the top of their house, I don't know, whatever it is, they want to feel like there's some destination on their outing. Navigational skill can play into it. How comfortable are they being out there? And wayfinding and making sure that we're kind of matching. Generally, folks who don't have much skill and don't want a long experience are going to stay close to the trailhead. And those who have more experience and want more of that backcountry extended outing will venture further. We don't want all of our easy intersections and intuitive navigation and signage way out here. We need more higher concentration of loops and trails and easy intersections and signage close into the trailhead and the access points, right? So this comes into effect at the system level and the trail level and everything in between. These are the questions I tend to ask myself, when it's like, all right, get in the user's head. What are they going to do? What's Joe Public going to do here? What's Joe Cyclist, Joe Hiker, Joe Equestrian? What are they going to do? These are the questions I ask myself. So we've got, one of those 5 questions. Does anyone have struggle with that a little bit or wonder why we put that, one of those 5 questions on a slide? Pretty clear, like everyone's feeling good, like they get it, they can kind of relate themselves maybe? Yeah?
Yep.
And then there's this piece too, what do people want? And this also comes back to the whole models of user conflict. But, again, stuff that folks are after in their outing. There's one more thing that users tend to want, and it's often not talked about because in some places it's a dirty word. It's the F word. 4-letter word. F-U-N-N. Fun. Right? I mean, it's an experience. They want fun. So we gotta, we gotta keep that in mind. Again, we're doing an experience. I'm gonna run through a couple of these really fast. We have pedestrians. They come in different shapes and sizes, and they often want different things on a trail. I would consider a dog walker, the poop loop, very different than Dan, the trail runner. Yet they're both pedestrians. And I'd say that's also very different than a climber. A climber, they're using a trail as transportation. They want to get
to the
from
wall.
car to crag, generally speaking. And I'm stereotyping, but sometimes these stereotypes help us get in the mindset. This is Cottonwood Pass between Buena Vista and Taylor Reservoir. People get here, they want their quick outing, they want the viewpoint.
Mm.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Nope.
Look at all those scars. But if we were to do like a meandering social trail or a little trail that gets to the top, are they going to take it? No, they're going to shortcut the heck out of it. So if we have a destination-based user, we might have to reach into that bag of tricks and be able to run some steeper trail. This is Boulder Canyon. Put in some stone steps and some barriers because that was all getting denuded, so the restoration would take, and there's kind of a nice little belay platform there now. Let's bump ahead a little bit. We've got equestrians. Again, some would want to do, some land managers I've dealt with say, oh, it's equestrians. It needs to be sandy or bark chips.
No.
Well, there's quite likely there's a group of equestrians that think that would just be wonderful. But there's also those that want that backcountry experience, that adventure. There are some out there who do not want to be on a trail. They want to have the Wild West experience and just cross the land. Right? So again, who are our users? Understand them. Same thing applies when we're talking about cyclists. Right? We've got the kids, we've got kids actually are generally pretty good riders pretty quickly. We've got some of the most timid riders are actually adults that may or may not have a lot of skills or comfort even on the bike. You've got some, I won't say thrill seekers, but those who want that challenge to push themselves a little bit or a lot bit. Again, shape, size is not just the cyclists, but also the bikes. Very different experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's look a little bit at, how about these guys? ADA, it's got to be accessible trail, right? We're going to have a trail that wheelchairs can go on. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Good. These guys at this trail building school, they asked my friends Mark and Laura. He's the trails czar from Parks Canada. They're senior trails analysts. Mark and Laura were putting on a trail building school similar to tonight, but a week long. And these guys said, "Hey, can you just lift me onto that picnic table?" Yeah, but why? I just want to just lift me on the picnic table. Guy rolls up to the edge, looks over, off the table, lands on the wheels, and rolls away.
Yeah.
He was making a point, right? Not just that he was a good wheelchair handler.
Mm-hmm.
He was making a point. He was tired of the crushed, fine, and concrete trails.
Yeah.
He wanted some stuff that was challenging. He wanted the same experience as this guy.
Yeah.
Right? Back in the woods, that backcountry experience. Challenge. So again, the point there is let's get in users' heads. User conflict, I don't want to get into too much other than tonight, other than there are really two types of conflict. There's the actual call it actual conflict, that's the term that's usually used. I don't like it, I don't like the term. But these are where there's either an injury or an altercation. Then there's this other realm, and this is 95 to 98% of conflict, is what would be classified as perceived conflict. There's different ways of defining that. The kind of leading user conflict model that's talked about in my industry is called the goal interference model. Meaning that we go out on trails, or all those things that were on the left a few slides back, a lot of which is getting away from city, getting away from work, traffic, and other people. Get out alone by ourselves, maybe we just with friends. So when we see other people and have to interact with them on the trail, it is kind of interfering with that goal of getting out in the way. Who do we see if we're out on, say, Batasso? 4-mile loop. You go out for a hike. Who do you see?
Mountain bikes.
Right? Why?
On the road.
Well, you see, as a hiker, you see anyone who's going the opposite direction. If you're doing a loop, right? You're doing a loop this way. You see everybody who's doing the loop the other way.
Mm.
And you see anybody who's going at a significantly different speed than you. So if you're hiking at 3 miles an hour around the loop, and a mountain biker starts, you're halfway around the loop, and a mountain biker starts at 6 miles an hour, average speed, you're still gonna see each other. So they're gonna see about half the hikers, if there's even distribution of use and direction, you're gonna see half the hikers, and you're gonna see every mountain bike. In that situation, probably see every mountain bike twice, because a mountain bike wants to ride for more than 40 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
you know, 30 minutes. They probably do 2 loops so they can get in an hour or so. If you're a mountain bike, who do you see?
All the hikers.
Everyone
You
else.
see it, the mountain bikes are going the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Habitats is an example. And you see every hiker, again, probably twice. So even though some of that regulation was done to reduce conflict, there's some pros and cons, you know, to any of these policies. Again, the key thing is be thinkers. You know, there are pros and cons to each approach. Sometimes certain management choices can actually increase conflict. Now, design-wise, when we come down to a trail experience, some of that perceived conflict is startling or spooking, but it's also, again, it's also how often are you seeing somebody. What if we slowed bikes down a little bit? What if they were averaging 10 miles an hour and we can get them down to 6 miles an hour? We reduce that interaction, we reduce the startle. So that's one of the things that sometimes we're going to do with chokes and anchors, is we're going to manage speed. And you guys will be in this situation. You have a crew, a couple cyclists on it. Hey, we're putting this in to slow bikes down. Doesn't sound good, right?
No.
Cyclists probably aren't going to sound really psych. However, done well, whatever that choke or feature or texture is, can actually add to that challenge, add to the experience, and extend their outing time. So we might only have 6 miles of trail, but a little slower, as long as it still feels good and is fun, might actually give them that hour instead of that 35 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Think like trail designers when you're out there. The moral of the story on all this, you guys recognize this cat?
Oh yeah.
I used to say people on, water off for trails, but I have something I like a little better now. I like to say focus your users on the trail. Right, we're trying to keep them on the trail. Sometimes we're even trying to focus their attention if we're trying to not, you know, if we don't want to take them to the waterfall they can see. I've actually done that, by the way. Not supposed to go to this waterfall. It's a small park. You could see the waterfall from almost everywhere in the park. But where it was really obvious, we went in between this big chunk of boulders, took the trail steep, made it challenging. Going down it, you're like putting your hand on this boulder and this boulder, you know. Going up, same thing, steep, challenging section. Most of the people never even saw the waterfall because it was in plain view, because we took their focus onto the trail. Same thing, water, not just off. We don't want to create ditches off the trail to get more volume and velocity. We want to disperse water. Yeah! Awesome. Okay, let's take a, oh wait, no, let's not take a break. Let's get through, what do we want to do here? Let's go through rolling contour trail real quick. We're like 8:30, alright? Is that it? Sweet, perfect. So, new school trail, some people call it the solution trail. Most trails now, we're designing as rolling contour trails. You're going to hear that term. We have anomalous situations sometimes we're not going to do that. Generally speaking, we're looking for contour trail, particularly a rolling contour trail. The big factors there, we're going to go through these a little bit, is where it's placed on the landscape, the steepness of the trail relative to the landscape, and a couple other factors. And it's largely about, again, dispersing that water and kind of focusing users, making it fun, taking where they want to go, and providing a sense of place, mimicking the landscape. Right? The trail should feel like the place that it's in, the setting it's in. Let's talk about water a little bit. So the big thing here is water comes down the hill. Right? It rains, hits the hillside, slowly goes down. Due to the bottom, there's probably going to be some little draws, and they feed into gullies. We don't want to disrupt the natural hydrology. We want to work with that natural hydrology and mimic it, and let water go where it's supposed to naturally go. When we have a trail across the hillside, we want water to come down the hill, come down the back slope of the trail, cross the tread, keep on going. Just like that trail wasn't even there. Right? That's the idea. We're not channeling it. We're not running it. We're not changing the hydrology. There's a joke, by the way, in my industry. Trail designers, we design the trail to match the landscape. Road engineers, are there any engineers in here? Any road engineers? Okay. Road engineers, their job is how do we change the landscape to fit the road, right? We do the opposite. We don't do ditches. Well, rarely do we do ditches. So that's what we're shooting for in terms of hydrology.
So that 5% keep it from coming back and coming back and coming back on the lower lip?
It's part of it. It helps. Yeah. So that this 5%.
Yeah.
So this is our tread. We're going to see some better diagrams about this later. Our tread is actually not level. Our tread is, if this is the hillside coming down, it's tilted out at 5-ish%. There's exceptions. There's places we don't do that because user forces, let's say, around a corner. If we don't want those forces in shear, we don't want to put them in compression, we might actually tip it in, channelize a little water, and then dip it and let it go out again. It's a good rule of thumb. That said, outslope almost always will eventually fail. So it by itself is not alone, or it's not enough. It alone is not enough. We've got two other primary things that we do. We're going to hit those right here next. Part of it's where are we locating the trail, right? Obviously, we're not going to put it below the high water mark of a reservoir. But I like how this photo, the little lines, those are level. Those are like contour lines on a topo map, right?
Yeah.
And so we're not going up and down. We're going generally across, parallel to those contour lines. We can still climb, and we roll. But it's placed on the cross slope. Okay? Across the cross slope. It's not on the fall line. Straight down the nose. Right? Why? That's Rich Edwards. He's an awesome trail builder, by the way. That's in West Virginia. That was an old road, turned into a trail. There's a little bit of soil missing. It's down, and this is, again, this part of the country, there's a little stream in every one of these draws, a little trout stream. It's not good for water quality when that soil goes into those streams. So that's on the fall line, that's what we call it, straight down the hill. That'd be perpendicular. If that was on this slide, that'd be like this, or this, right? That's one of my biggest pet peeves. So many agencies do their trail planning on a map without any contour lines. They're like, we should go from here to here. It's like, that's on the fall line. You're going to have that. So anyway, even gentle fall line. This is probably only 4%. But water gets trapped. It can't go anywhere. You can't get the water off. Once it's on, the path of least resistance is down the trail. Right? We also avoid flat areas. Again, you get a little compression, compaction. You've got the mud bog or the standing water. And what do people do?
Round.
Right. Which one's the trail?
It's like a fountain.
Right? So we avoid flats. But you guys look at this. Why don't we just go there? Well, on the flat, it'd be easier than digging this bench. That's why. So let's talk a little bit about grade. Grade's simple. It's just math. Rise over run. We'll look at the grade of the cross slope. So that's the hill that you're on. And we'll look at the grade. The trail grade would be how steep does the trail climb. Again, generally speaking, we want it to be along the cross slope, right? Now, we're not going to talk about design too much, but our grades need to be sustainable. So they're on the cross slope, but how steeply can we go? There's not a magic number. We can't say you can go 8%. All situations, 8%. 8% on an 8% slope with fall line. But what if we have a 70% cross slope? Almost 45 degrees. That's 100%. 45 is 100%. we could only 8% there. No, we can probably go a little more, but we can't necessarily go 60%. So there's 3 guidelines for sustainable grade. Ratio of the trail grade to the cross slope. What users are going to be on the trail. This is partly about erosion, but partially also about how difficult should the experience be, how strenuous. And then what are the site conditions, which includes soil is probably the most important, but how much rainfall, is there canopy, does that rainfall come, you know, in slow, long soaking rains or big thunder showers, you know, again, volume and velocity for water. So those are the things, we basically have those 3 constraints, right? We try to go with in any situation you're basically going with the most conservative of those 3 constraints, right? So you have a really steep hillside, which means in terms of ratio of trail grade to hillside grade, you know, maybe you're thinking, oh, it could be 20%. But it's sandier soils, poor soils, we can only probably do 6%. Or it's this is supposed to be like the little half-mile nature trail. Probably should keep our grades into like 5 to 7%, right? So there is a little bit of a magic number, and that's 10%. 10% doesn't sound steep, but over a longer distance, like a sustained 10% on average is actually a fairly steep trail. Flagstaff is 8%, Flagstaff Road, top to bottom 8%. Steepest pitch is 14, but top to bottom it's only 8%. You hear this from mountain bikes too. It needs to be steep to be fun, to be fast. One of the fastest, most popular mountain bike trails in the world is A-Line at Whistler. Top to bottom, 7 to 8%. Steep trail, you have to be on your brakes all the time. So that average over the trail maxes out about 10% if the hillside and the soils and the users can take it. When I'm laying out a corridor, so again, the average grade over a distance, I try to make sure it's less than 1/3 of the cross slope that I'm on. So if I'm on a 20% cross slope, my average trail grade is probably not more than about 6%. If I'm on a 70% cross slope, or 60%, oh great, I can run 20. No, probably not. Probably need to keep it in that 10 or whatever the soils would take. 10, 12, whatever the soils would take. Around here we don't have a canopy. Our moisture tends to come in quick events except for in the winter. The other thing we're talking about is these grade reversals, and we're going to go into those a bit here. Water, if the outslope fails and water gets stuck on the trail and starts to flow down it, if we can go back up a little bit before we continue descending, that water has to exit here. Let's see that. Right? Outslope fails, water's trapped on the trail, it just keeps running down the trail. More. Volume and velocity. But if we have that dip, then there's a place that water has to exit.
Yes.
Right? And if we have those frequently, we're not allowing too much volume or velocity to accumulate, and we're not really changing the natural hydrology because we're shedding that water here and here and here. We're not letting it all collect and move from one draw away over around the corner to the next draw. Right? We're keeping water in its natural place. Here's a good example. This is the same trail. This is Monarch Crest Trail near Salida, I think. Yeah, I might be goofing up, and this might actually be Montana. I think this is this Salida picture. You see the rut forming here?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
No grade reversals. Here's another piece of the same trail, little grade reversal. This is actually steeper. This is actually steeper than this section. But because we're shedding water here and here, we're not allowing enough to accumulate to really be a problem.
Yeah.
This is Sunshine Canyon Trail. This is a trail I designed and the city built. You can kind of see the grade reversals there. Right?
Mm-hmm.
All these little rolls of places that water is going to get off the trail. Notice where this one is. The low point relative to, here's a roll on a hillside, here's a draw, here's another little crest. This is a low point. So that water coming down down that draw, right? The hillside's kind of draining into the draw and then down. When that hits the trail, we want it to just continue in its natural course. We don't want it to hit and then follow down the trail. Again, now we're starting to screw up our facility, and we're changing the natural hydrology. Neither of which we want to do. Lots of talking, lots of numbers, lots of arrows and diagrams. Sounds really scientific, right? I got an easy way to remember this. And it comes from a buddy of mine, Woody, who is an excellent trail builder. He gives these presentations too.
Woody Allen?
From Woody Allen. Woody Keene. He actually started Misty Mountain Threadworks. He was in Climbing World before trails. He has a saying. He likes to say, "Give her some." You can't. That's Woody. You know. You can't help but he sucks you in. Okay, Woody. What is He's like, oh yeah. You gotta give trail some Yeah, but what's Woody? Undulation and meander. So give that trail some Not only does it shed your water and creates all those grade reversals, it fits the landscape. If you're a trail runner or a mountain biker, it's really fun.
Oh yeah.
And if you're out there hiking, it doesn't feel like you're on a straight line road, right? It has those dips and weaves and undulations, those meanders around the boulders, over the tree, back down, through the draw. It's really engaging, and it feels really natural, and it feels like trail versus road, right? Which comes back to that whole experience thing, that why we're doing this stuff. We're providing the four-letter word, the F word, right? So with that, I want to hear everyone say the F word. 1, 2, 3. Fun. All right. Let's move on to the planning process real quick here.
Do you want to schedule a break time?
Yeah, and then we're gonna do a break right after this. Depending on the project, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. We'll go out there and inventory everything that's on the ground. Social trails, system trails, whatever. We'll assess the conditions. How well is it holding up in terms of physical sustainability? How well is the agency or landowner be able to manage it? Is it meeting the social needs of people, visitors' needs? We do all that stuff. We talk to stakeholders. We help agencies kind of state their goals for the project. We'll put together a conceptual plan, all these crazy maps. One of the plans I did for local, it's like this thick, and no one wants to read it, but you can turn to the maps and see some of this fun stuff. Once we get to this conceptual plan and some of the solutions, we need to go out there and ground truth these ideas and make sure they actually work in the real world, in the field. And on the topography, think about where do we place the trail relative to the topography and the cross slope, right? So we actually would look at these things on the ground, even with Google Earth, even with topo maps, both of which, incidentally, Google Earth especially, takes a lot of the fun out of my job. More desk time, less field time. But we still have to go ground truth it. Then we go out and lay out the corridor. Trail goes somewhere generally in this area, right? Can we get from point A to point B? Can we hit some of our positive control points like views, the waterfall, the vista, the trailhead? When we get to those places, can we keep people away from some of our negative control points? The pine monkey habitat, or the view of that drainage mining pond lake that glows at night, any of those things we don't want to take people. Private property. How do we link these things up? We lay it out. Then we definitely want to have some of our other specialists, not our trailologists, but like ecologists, botanists, wildlife ecologists, some of our cultural, resource folks. We want that review. We want them to get on site too and see, how would we potentially be impacting or helping manage some of the things they worry about. But we also are going to train them. We're going to teach them some of the stuff while we're out there talking in the field. Once that gets all approved, that's when we get into the alignment design. Alignment design is above this tree, below that rock, through these two trees, this gateway. That's the specifics. But it goes through these processes. Depending on the project, that's when we also write specifications. And those can be as simple as very little, hey, trail's going to be 3 feet wide, go to town, to very, very detailed if it's going to go to contracting. How much wall? This is exactly what it looks like. This much outslope. Here's when you do this. Here's how you cut your branches on clearing your quarter. And they can range the whole gamut. WRV, even though it seems like we have a lot of paperwork and processes, on the lighter end of that in terms of our construction notes. That's my favorite tool, the clinometer.
Oh, not the guy?
Not the guy. He's kind of no, he's not really a tool. He looks like a tool, but he's a nice guy.
Sweet glasses.
That helps us measure grade, and that's one of our biggest tasks when we're doing our corridor layout. That's what it looks like when you look through this little hole. And we'll play this in the field, so don't worry about it. We'll get a goof around with it.
Soon to.
That alignment design, that's when we get that, like I said, really specific. Sometimes it's just, you know, pin flags in the ground. Sometimes it's drawings. Sometimes it's drawings superimposed over a site. This was right there. Camping area by Gross. Winnegar Ridge. This was one where our user, oh, here's a fun thing. Okay. Parking area. Like fenced in parking area. Campsites. Lake. Where do people want to go? You show up on Friday night, you know, our user is not the backpacker or the trail runner.
Get drunk and go to the lake, of course.
Yeah, cut off jeans, flip flops, and a heavy damn cooler of a beer.
Yeah.
They're not going to, you know, do this little trail that doesn't break the half rule all the way down. I can see the fire ring. I'm going. So we actually had to design our trail to be very, very efficient and drunkable. Yes. Drunk navigable. It had to be efficient. This was I call this is a destination-oriented user. It's like those folks who are parking at the top of Cottonwood Pass and want to go see the view. It's like the climbers who are saying, "There's the crag. Let's go. Rope up. Got my harness on. These shoes are tight. Let's get there fast." Right? I should have fun with this. So in this case, we created some of those grade reversals with some gentle mounds. Wish Morgan was here. Morgan, who now she was a volunteer at the time, but she now works for the WRV. Did a great job with it. And then we did this timber steps and some other landscaping and stuff. Yeah, there's pictures on Jamie's door. So it was kind of a fun project. Let's take 5.
Wake up.